Bro, that's not fair. His best friend, standing in the doorway with his chest puffed up and his arms crossed. Tyrone groaned. Seriously? Before he could respond, Daryl shoved him, causing Tyrone to stumble back into the trash bins. Tyrone clenched his fists, anger surging through him. Pause. Let's rewind to the beginning. When Yesterday Was, by Leah Judea. Fighting for forgiveness. Tyrone sat on the worn couch, his eyes glued to the video game on the TV screen. His best friend, Diego, was sitting next to him, furiously tapping the buttons on his controller. Tyrone lived in an old apartment building, right above a busy street, where car horns and shouting could be heard all day long. It wasn't the best neighborhood, but he didn't mind. He and Diego had been friends for as long as he could remember, and that made everything better. Got you? Tyrone yelled as his character knocked Diego's character off the screen. Diego groaned in frustration. Bro, that's not fair. You always beat me. Tyrone laughed and handed Diego a can of soda. Maybe you should practice more. They both started laughing. But just as Diego was about to take a sip, Tyrone's little brother, Hakeem, burst into the room. Tyrone, Mom said, it's your turn to take out the trash, Hakeem said, standing in the doorway with his chest puffed up and his arms crossed, trying to sound like a grown-up. Tyrone groaned. Seriously? Now? Yeah, she's angry, so you better do it quick. With a deep sigh, Tyrone stood up. Fine. I'll be back in a minute, Diego. As Tyrone grabbed the trash bag and headed out to the hallway, he grumbled under his breath. Why do I always have to do everything around here? He walked down the creaky stairs and out the front door of the apartment building. The trash bins were behind the building in an alleyway, and as Tyrone threw the bag into the bin, he noticed a group of children from his school walking down the alley. They were the troublemakers, the ones who always seemed to be skipping class or getting into fights. Tyrone recognized one of them right away. Daryl. Daryl was a big guy, always pushing people around and making rude comments in class. Tyrone had even heard that Daryl got suspended last year for fighting. Yo, Tyrone! Daryl shouted, noticing him by the trash bins. What are you doing out here? Taking out the garbage? Like a good little boy? The other children with Daryl started laughing. Tyrone felt his face heat up with embarrassment, but he forced himself to stay calm. I'm just doing what I gotta do, Tyrone replied, trying not to sound too defensive. Daryl swaggered over to him, his group following close behind. You're always such a goody-goody. Why don't you ever come hang out with us after school? Afraid you'll get in trouble? Tyrone could feel his heart pounding. He knew that hanging out with Daryl and his group would only lead to trouble, but he didn't want to seem scared or weak. Before he could respond, Daryl shoved him, causing Tyrone to stumble back into the trash bins. See? I knew you didn't have the guts, Daryl sneered. The group of children erupted into laughter again. Tyrone clenched his fists, anger surging through him. He wanted to fight back, to prove he wasn't scared. But then, a voice in his mind reminded him of something his mom always said. A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. Proverbs 15:1. Tyrone had heard that verse in church so many times, but at this moment, it was hard to follow. Taking a deep breath, Tyrone looked Daryl in the eye and stood his ground. I'm not scared of you, Daryl, but I'm not going to fight you either. I'm not about to stoop to your level. Daryl's smirk faded for a second, replaced by a flicker of confusion. It was clear he wasn't used to people standing up to him without getting angry. You're weird, man, Daryl muttered, turning away. Come on, let's get out of here, he said to his friends, and they walked off down the alley, still chuckling. Tyrone watched them go, feeling a mixture of relief and frustration. Part of him wished he had just punched Daryl, but deep down, he knew he had done the right thing. Still, the encounter left him feeling shaken. When Tyrone got back to the apartment, he threw himself onto the couch, his mind racing. Diego noticed something was wrong right away. What happened? Diego asked, putting down his game controller. Daryl and his friends tried to mess with me again. Tyrone muttered. I didn't fight back, but I kind of wish I did. Diego raised an eyebrow. You? Fight? That doesn't sound like you, man. Tyrone sighed. I know, but it's hard not to. I hate feeling like I'm just letting him walk all over me. Diego nodded, but then he said, Don't your mom always say that verse about forgiving people? Tyrone sat up and looked at his friend. Yeah, Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32. And be ye kind, one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. She's always telling me that, but it's easier said than done. Diego shrugged. Yeah, but it's true. I mean, remember that time you forgave me when I accidentally broke your game controller? I thought you were going to be angry at me forever. You even got in trouble with your mom, but you didn't even hold that against me. Tyrone thought back to that day. Diego had been so nervous to tell him about the broken controller, but Tyrone had let it go. It hadn't been easy, but it had felt good not to hold a grudge. You're right, Tyrone admitted. It felt better to forgive you than to stay angry. Diego grinned. See? Maybe forgiving Daryl is the way to go. He's probably going through his own stuff. Tyrone hadn't thought about it like that before. He knew Daryl didn't have the best home life. People at school gossiped about how Daryl's father was never around, and how his mom worked 2 jobs just to make ends meet. Maybe that was why Daryl acted the way he did. The next day at school, Tyrone saw Daryl sitting alone in the cafeteria. For a moment, Tyrone thought about avoiding him, but then he remembered the verse from Ephesians, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. Taking a deep breath, Tyrone walked over to Daryl's table and sat down across from him. Daryl looked up, surprised. What do you want? Daryl asked, his tone defensive. Tyrone hesitated, but then he said, I just wanted to say that I forgive you for what happened yesterday. Daryl stared at him, clearly caught off guard. You forgive me? For what? For shoving me, Tyrone said. I'm not angry about it. I know things aren't easy for you, and I get why you might be frustrated. Daryl frowned. You don't know anything about me. Maybe not, Tyrone admitted. But I know that holding on to anger doesn't help. So I'm letting it go. For a long moment, Daryl didn't say anything. Then, to Tyrone's surprise, Daryl muttered, Whatever, man. Do what you want. But as Tyrone stood up to leave, he noticed that Daryl's usual smirk was gone, replaced by something else, something like relief. As Tyrone walked back to his own table, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. Forgiving Daryl hadn't been easy, but it had been the right thing to do. And in that moment, Tyrone understood the power of God's grace more than ever before. And be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. Ephesians 4:32. You just heard a short story from When Yesterday Was, a collection of 23 powerful Christian short stories that features some of the same characters and brand new ones you haven't met yet. It's available now on Amazon.
No matter what, I let it go, I give it up. It ain't for them, it's for my soul. Chains fall off when I let it roll. Luke 23:34, even on the cross. Father forgive, he took the loss. So who am I to hold that grudge? Mercy on me, so I forgive no matter what. Ain't easy when the scar's still fresh, but Romans 12:19, God handled the rest.